Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, starting with the last line on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara brings a brayso in regard to the thickness of baking matzos. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanon, Ein oifin pas avo ba'Pesach divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is the opinion that one cannot bake thick matzos. Beis Hillel matir. Beis Hillel is matir. Here we're talking about a concern that maybe such matzos will come to chametz, and therefore Beis Shammai is oiser, whereas Beis Hillel is not concerned about that. Ask the Gemara on top of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, v'kama pas avo, what's considered to be thick matzos that would be considered to be a problem according to Beis Shammai, and even so Beis Hillel will be matir. Rav Huna tefach. We're talking about a thickness of one tefach. Because we have a precedent in regards to the lechem haponim, the showbreads. Those were 12 breads that were put on the golden mizbeach, on the golden shulchan, and that was requiring that they do not become chametz. So here we have a precedent that the thickness over there was a tefach. So to over here, baking the matzahs, Beis Hillel will be matir if they're no more than a tefach or less. Maski for Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks, how can you use lechem haponim as a precedent? Im omru bezrizin yom b'she'enon zrizin. If they will say that in regards to lechem haponim was mutter, that's because there was zrizin, because people were very careful, and they had people who were then making sure that it was done with diligence, so that no chametz would come about. But when the layman he bakes his matzos, maybe he will not be so concerned and careful as those who are baking the lechem haponim. In regards to the lechem haponim, we know when it comes also to the menachos, the way that it was done, these menachos were done with shalosh meyos shifa and chamesh meyos bi'ita. They had to pound it 500 times. In other words, there's a lot of toil that went into the dough to make such lechem haponim. And therefore, you can't bring a precedent from there, because when it comes to matzahs, a person is not toiling in making those matzahs as much, and therefore maybe it will lead to chametz. Another difference, im omru be'etzim yeveshim, yoimu be'etzim lachim. When it comes to baking the lechem haponim, they would use wood that was already very dried out, causing a stronger type of fire. And therefore, there's less of a concern for chametz to come about. But when it comes to baking matzos, a person may use also 18 that are lachim. Im amr betanur cham, yomer betanur tzonim. When they would bake the lachem haponim, they would bake it with a fire from a tanur that was constantly being heated and reheated. And therefore, it's stronger, whereby it causes less time for it to be baked, whereby it's less of a concern for chametz to then come about. Masha'en came when a person bakes matzahs. Another difference, im amru betanur shel mateches yom betanur shel cheres. In the Beis HaMikdash, they used a tanur that was made out of metal, which again was even hotter, and therefore again less of a concern for chametz to then come about. Whereas when one uses a tanur shel cheres, that's not as powerful, and therefore the heat is not as strong, whereby it could lead to chametz if you have such a thick sized type of matzah. So the Gemara has rejected that indeed we're talking about the thickness of a tefach. Omar Rav Yirmiyahu bar Abba she'ilis es Rebbe biyichud. Rabbi Yirmiyahu bar Abba said, I asked Rebbe, my Rebbe biyichud, I asked him privately exactly what is being said. Umanu, and he said, Umanu, who is this referring to? Rebbe. Or Dika da Amrei, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyahu bar Abba, Amar Rav. He said the name of Rav She'ilas as Rebbe biyichud. I asked Rebbe, my Rebbe, privately, Umanu, and who is this? Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. Al Koponim, I asked him in private, my pas aveh. What's pas avo that it's referring to in this machlokes in Beis Shammai in Beis Hillel? Says the Gemara, pas meruba. That he answered, it's pas meruba. It's not what we thought before, that there's a machlokes, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, as to the concern that maybe it will come about chametz. That's not the machlokes. There, they're arguing about something else. What are they arguing about? Pas meruba. When there's a lot of pas, a lot of matzos, there's an excess of matzos even beyond that which you're going to use for Yom Tif. On that, Beis Shammai says you cannot bake such matzos, what we're calling pas ava. Whereas Beis Hillel said it's matirin. What's the machlok? Says the Gemara. V'mai karule pas ava. Why is it called pas ava if it's pas meruba? Because mishum de nafisha belisha, there's a lot of dough that has to be kneaded, and therefore it's called a thickness of matzos, of pas. But indeed, again, the machlokes is not a machlokes in regards to concern that it will come about chametz. That's not why Beis Shammai says it's osur, and Beis Hillel is not concerned about that. They're arguing about something else entirely different. They're arguing about whether there's, Gemara is going to explain, whether there's a tircha that will make it so that it's prohibited to be done on Yom Tif. Says the Gemara, "V'i boys ema be'asrei dahaitano." Oh, another reason why it's called pas ava, in addition to the fact that there's a lot of dough that is being kneaded, the Gemara says, "I boys ema be'asrei dahaitano," in the place where this tana is situated, the pas meruba pas ava karule. They would call pas meruba many loaves of bread to be called pas ava. Al Kapain, the Gemara asks, my timer, what's the reason why pas ava, again, according to Beis Shammai, is prohibited and Beis Hillel is permitted? Oh, if the reason is because it's an additional tircha that is not necessary, and therefore the additional tircha is osur to be done on Yom Tif, and therefore Beis Shammai says it's osur. But Beis Hillel says it's not osur. Why? Because although these are beyond the amount of matzahs that will be used on Yom Tif, by filling up the oven, even with an excess, it'll cause those that you will be eating to be of a better quality. So therefore it's mutter. My area, asked the Gemara, al kaponim, if the issue over here is tircha on Yom Tif, my area b'Pesach, afi b'Yom Tif nami, is not only miyuchad, a machlokes by Pesach, this is equally true by all other Yomim Tovim. Says the Gemara, and hachinami, that's true indeed, that's so, that this would be an equal machlokes in other Yomim Tovim as well. V'hai tana b'Yom Tif shel Pesach koi, but this Tana was talking about that it happened to be on Pesach. And since he's talking about Pesach, therefore, he brings the machlokes over here. But hu adin? And hochanami, that indeed, this machlokes appears also by other chagim, also by Sukkot and by Shavuos as well. Tani nami hoch, we have a brisa that also says like this. Beis Shammai oimrim ein oifim pas ava b'Yom Tif. He says, not just by Pesach, in Yom Tif, you can't bake pas ava, thick bread. Why? Again, because it's a tircha that's shaloi l'tzarich. Ubeis Hillel matir, Beis Hillel says, although it's a tircha, but it is going to be beneficial for the challah or the matzah that you're baking, therefore it's permissible. Says the Gemara, Vayter Tanu Rabbanan, bring the following brisa. Yoitzim bepas nikiya ubahadra. One can fulfill his mitzvah of matzah with both that matzah which is used with flour that is clean, white flour, as well as that which is coarse, the bran has not been taken out, uvesrikin hamitzuyorim b'Pesach, as well as those matzos that were made with different types of figures, different types of pictures that was drawn on it. Even though they said that one cannot use such matzos, that one has made different types of images of different types of tziurim, nonetheless, he's yoitzi. He asked the chachamim, why can't you make such matzos that have different figures on it on Pesach? Because a woman, when she's making these matzahs, she's going to then try to then draw out some sort of figure, some sort of tziur, and that will cause her to then bring it about a chametz, because of the timing that it will cause for her to make the tziurim. Omar lahem, he said back to them, then she can put it into some sort of stamp and push it in, and it'll happen immediately without any time factor. And therefore there won't be an issue of chametz. Amruloi, they said to him, Yoimru kol asrikin asurin v'srike baitus mutarin. All the tziyurim would be osir, but this of baitus would be mutter when you use a stamp. Not everybody has a stamp. And therefore, when they will go ahead and make some sort of lines or whatever tzir that they're making, that will then cause a problem of chimutz. Omar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, pamachas nichnasti achar abo lebeis Rabbi Gamliel. I followed my father to the house of Rabbi Gamliel. Veheviu lefon of srikin hamitzurim b'Pesach, and they brought before him matzos that had tziurim on Pesach. Amarti, I said to my father, Rabbi Tzadok, Abba, loikach amru chacham, did the chacham not say, ein oisin srikin hamitzurim b'Pesach? By the way, in regards to kibud av va'em, one should not tell his father or his mother directly what he's doing is incorrect, but rather in a kavadika way by asking a question. In this case, the example is, didn't the Chacham say that one cannot make matzos with srikin hamitzuyorin on Pesach? Omar li, my father, he said to me, Beni, my son, lo shel kol adam amru. They didn't say this in regards to a regular person when he makes his matzos at home. Ela shel nachtoimin amru. They said about bakers who make commercial matzos. Because those who make commercial matzos, according to this, is making it with much more time. They're more concerned about being more beautified when they sell it to the public. There are those that say the opposite. This is what he said to his son. They didn't say this about baker's matzahs, because they are somebody who do this regularly, so therefore do it very quickly. But the individual, then they said there's a concern of chimutz. Rabbi Yossi says that you can make srikin like rikikin, like wafers. Vein oisin srikin can mean gluskois, but you can't make them like types of rolled dough. Ton Rabbanon, the Gemara brings up brisa of various things that do not have the status that they can make challah. In other words, they're not considered to be lechem, and therefore the ramifications are you don't have a chiyuv to take challah out, but you also cannot use it for your matzahs. They're not considered to be lechem. Ton Rabbanon, hasufganin, those breads that are made like sponge. Vehaduvshonim, those who are fried with dvash, with honey. Veiskoritin, and those that are made like wafers. Vechalas hamasres, and those chalas hamasres, which like are on a machavas. Vehameduma, those that are mixed together with some truma. Peturim minachala, the list over here says there's potter from chala, it's not considered to be lechem. My chalas hamasres. What is this that's included in the list that's called chalas hamasres? The Gemara wants to identify. Brings three different opinions. Omar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Ze chalut shel balei batim. This is that which is scalded by balabatim. Omar Reish Lakish halalu maise ilpis hein. These are referring to those that are fried in a pan, and therefore it's like they're being cooked and not baked. Rabbi Yochanan Omar maise ilfis chayovin. He argues on Reish Lakish and says a maise ilfis, if it's fried, meaning what? It's on a pan and it's considered to be in your mind like it is cooking and not baking, that itself is also chayavin. Rather, these are referring to a list of things that is going to be made in the sun, and therefore that's what's going to be considered to be potter from challah. Meisvei, the Gemara asked a question on Reish Lakish. All of these things that we mentioned before. Here it states in the Brisa, if you make it in a frying pan, and therefore it is still going to be chayiv in challah. Bechama peturin. If it's in the sun, however, then they will be potter. Tiyufte the Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. This is a refutation of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, who said that you couldn't, yes, we're talking about putting on a frying pan, and that makes it potter from challah. Omar Ula said, Amar Lach Rabbi Shimon Lakish, he wants to defend Rabbi Shimon Lakish from this refutation. Hacha b'mayaskinon. We're talking about over here, shehir tiach ulevasoif hidbik. When you heated up the frying pan, and then you stuck in the dough, then it's going to be similar to a tanur, the way a person normally bakes bread, where you heat up the oven, and then you stick on the walls of the oven dough. So then it's going to be chayiv, like it says over here, chayiv in nechal in this brisa. Aval, asked the Gemara, hidbik ulevasoif Hertiach mai. Then if it's the opposite, if you first put in the dough and then you would heat up the frying pan, what would that be din? Hachi nami di beturin. So you're saying that would also be potter. If that's so, asks the Gemara on this suggestion, adetani seifo, then that which it teaches in the seifo, asoin bechame peturin. It teaches in the seifo that if it's made in the sun, then it's going to be potter from challah. Liflu v'lisni b'dido. Let the brisa go ahead and distinguish and teach within itself. Bamed devar mamurim. It should say, when is it so that it's going to be potter and challah? Kigon sheyirtiach levesoif hayidbik. When it's hirtiach, it's heated up. Then it's going to be chayiv and challah. When it's hirtiach levesoif hidbik, then it's going to be then chayiv and challah because it's going to be similar to a regular oven where you heat it up and then you stick in the dough. Aval hidbik ulevesoif hirtiach pturin. Then it should distinguish and teach. However, it's in the opposite order. You first were madbik the dough and then you heated it up. Then it would be potter. Why didn't you teach it in the brisa that way? Elamai must be that that's not going to be the pshat like Rabbi Lakish wants to suggest. The Gemara answers no, because chisur mechser of a hachiktani. The brisa is, so to speak, missing words, and this is how you have to teach the brisa. Bamed devarim amuim. When is it going to be chayiv in chalo? Bihirtiach ulevesof hidbik. When you heated up the frying pan and then you stuck in the dough just like a tanur. Aval hidbik ulevesof. But if you did in the opposite order, you first put in the dough and then you heated it up, that's going to be potter and challah, just like if you baked it in the sun.